What if the reason you feel stuck, overwhelmed, or quietly dissatisfied with your life isn't because you're broken, but because you're trying too hard to avoid pain? Think about that for a second, because if that question made you uncomfortable, good. That's where this story really begins. We live in a world obsessed with comfort, comfort food, comfort zones, comfort scrolling at 2 a.m., comfortable lies that say everything should feel good all the time. But here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to say out loud. A painless life doesn't exist, and chasing one is exactly what's making you miserable. Now wait, before you click away or mentally argue with me, stay with me. Because this isn't about glorifying suffering. It's about understanding it. And once you do, pain stops feeling like the enemy and starts feeling like a guide. Here's where it gets real. Most people think happiness is the goal, as if life is a game where you eliminate problems and unlock permanent peace. But life doesn't work that way. Solve one problem and another one shows up. Get the job, now you stress about keeping it. Find love, now you risk heartbreak. Get in shape, now you deal with discipline and soreness. Problems don't disappear, they upgrade. And that's not a flaw in life. That is life. So the real question isn't, how do I avoid pain? It's this. Which pain am I willing to choose? Because you're choosing either way. You can choose the pain of discipline or the pain of regret, the pain of honesty or the pain of living a lie, the pain of growth or the pain of staying exactly where you are and hating yourself for it. And here's the part nobody tells you. Trying to avoid pain doesn't make you safe. It makes you fragile. If you've never trained yourself to handle discomfort, every small problem feels like a catastrophe. A bad comment ruins your day. A rejection shakes your confidence. A setback makes you question your worth. Not because you're weak, but because you've been taught that pain means something went wrong. But what if pain isn't a signal to stop? What if it's a signal to pay attention? Think about the strongest people you know, not the loudest, not the flashiest, the mentally strong ones. They're not strong because life spared them. They're strong because life tested them, and they didn't run. They learned something most people never do. Pain isn't proof that you're failing. Pain is proof that you're engaged. Engaged with life, with reality, with something that actually matters. Now here's the twist, and this is where most people get it wrong. Not all pain is valuable. There's pain that builds you, and pain that just drains you. Pain with purpose versus pain with no meaning. Scrolling endlessly, hating yourself, that's empty pain. Staying in a job you despise because you're scared, that's empty pain. Avoiding hard conversations and letting resentment grow, that's empty pain. But learning a hard skill, setting boundaries and feeling uncomfortable, failing at something meaningful, telling the truth when it costs you, that pain does something different. It sharpens you. And deep down, you already know this. Every moment that changed you didn't come from comfort. It came from heartbreak, embarrassment, loss, failure. Moments where you thought, I can't handle this. And yet, here you are. Which brings us to the most important shift of all. You don't grow by avoiding suffering. You grow by choosing better problems. Problems aligned with your values. Problems that move you forward. Problems that hurt now but save you years of quiet regret. And once you understand that, life stops feeling like a punishment and starts feeling like a challenge you're capable of facing. But here's where it gets even deeper. Because pain doesn't just build strength, it reveals what you actually care about. And most people never slow down enough to see that. Wait till you hear this.
Here's something nobody warns you about. Pain doesn't just hurt, it exposes. It exposes what matters to you, what you value, what you're attached to, and what you've been avoiding. Because you only suffer deeply over things you care about. You don't feel heartbreak over someone you didn't love. You don't feel failure over a goal you never wanted. You don't feel fear unless something important is at stake. Pain is like a spotlight. It points directly at your values, even the ones you never consciously chose. And this is where most people get stuck. They experience pain, but instead of learning from it, they distract themselves. They numb it. blame others, scroll past it, pretend it doesn't mean anything. But pain always means something. The question is whether you listen or run. Mark Manson makes this uncomfortable point. Life is not about feeling good. It's about feeling good about the pain you choose. Because every value has a downside. Value honesty? You'll hurt people sometimes. You'll be misunderstood. Value growth? You'll feel inadequate before you feel capable. Value love? You'll risk loss. Value freedom? You'll deal with uncertainty and loneliness. There is no value without suffering attached to it. So when people say, "I just want to be happy," what they really mean is, "I want pleasure without responsibility." And that doesn't exist. Here's the brutal truth. If you don't consciously choose your values, society will choose them for you. And society's values are broken. More money, more status, more validation, more attention. But notice this. Those values are never satisfied. There's always someone richer, more attractive, more successful, more liked. So you suffer, but for nothing solid. That's why so many people feel exhausted, even when nothing is wrong. They're suffering for values that don't actually fulfill them. Now here's the shift that changes everything. Pain becomes meaningful when it's connected to something you respect. When you suffer for something you believe in, it feels different. Hard, but clean. Like muscle soreness after a workout. Uncomfortable, but honest. That's why discipline feels better than regret. Regret eats you slowly. Discipline burns briefly. And the longer you avoid short-term pain, the more long-term pain you accumulate. Avoid the gym today. Borrow pain from your future body. Avoid the conversation. Borrow pain from your future relationship. Avoid the risk. Borrow pain from your future self who wonders, what if? And eventually, that debt comes due. Here's where most people get confused. They think mentally strong people don't feel pain. But that's not true. They just don't waste it. They don't ask, why is this happening to me? They ask, what is this asking of me? What boundary do I need to set? What illusion needs to die? What responsibility am I avoiding? Pain becomes information instead of punishment. And when you see it that way, you stop fearing it. You stop running. You start choosing. Now let's talk about the most dangerous mistake of all. Trying to eliminate pain entirely. Because when you remove struggle, you don't get peace. You get emptiness. No challenge means no growth. No growth means no meaning. And meaning, not pleasure, is what makes life worth enduring. That's why people who have it all still feel hollow. No worthy problems left to solve. No tension pulling them forward. Which brings us to a powerful realization. The quality of your life is determined by the quality of your problems. Better problems equals better life. And pain is the admission price. But here's the final piece most people miss. Pain alone isn't enough. Because pain without ownership turns into bitterness, and pain with ownership turns into strength. Which leads us to the most empowering idea in this entire story. But here's where it gets real.
Here's the moment everything flips. Pain stops feeling random when you realize one uncomfortable truth. You are always choosing. Not choosing what happens to you, but choosing how you respond. And that choice changes everything. Mark Manson calls this radical responsibility. Not blame, not shame, ownership. Because blame keeps you stuck. Ownership gives you control. Two people can experience the same pain, the same rejection, the same failure, the same loss. and walk away with completely different lives. Why? Because one asks, "Whose fault is this?" And the other asks, "What's my responsibility now?" That second question is where power lives. Let's be clear. This doesn't mean everything is your fault. Some things are genuinely unfair. Some wounds were not caused by you. But healing? That part is always your responsibility. And the moment you accept that, you stop being a victim of your past and start becoming the author of your future. This is where most people resist, because responsibility feels heavy. It feels like pressure. But here's the paradox. Avoiding responsibility is far more painful than carrying it. Blame keeps pain alive. Ownership gives it an expiration date. Think about it. If everything is someone else's fault, you're powerless to change anything. But if something is your responsibility, even a small piece, you suddenly have leverage. And leverage is freedom. This is why growth always feels uncomfortable at first. Because taking responsibility means admitting, "I don't know. I messed up. I was wrong. I avoided this." And the ego hates that. The ego wants to be right. It wants to look good. It wants to protect the story. But growth requires sacrificing the story to improve the reality. And here's the quiet truth. Most people aren't afraid of pain. They're afraid of what pain might say about them. So they deflect, they distract, they justify. But mentally strong people do something rare. They let pain humble them instead of hardening them. They don't ask, "How do I escape this feeling?" They ask, "How do I use it?" That's the difference between suffering that destroys and suffering that builds. And once you see this, failure stops being terrifying. Because failure becomes feedback. It becomes data. A rough draft, not a verdict. Every mistake becomes a question. What didn't work? What belief was wrong? What can I adjust? This mindset turns life into a series of experiments instead of a final exam. You stop needing perfection. You start needing progress. And this is why action matters more than motivation. You don't need to feel ready to take responsibility. You just need to move. One step, one decision, one honest admission. Momentum doesn't come from confidence. Confidence comes from momentum. Now here's something most people miss. You can't grow without being wrong. Being wrong isn't a character flaw. It's the entry fee. Every version of you that improved required letting an older version die. Old beliefs, old habits, old identities. That's painful, but necessary. And resisting that pain is what keeps people stuck for years. They cling to certainty instead of curiosity. But curiosity is lighter. Curiosity asks, what if there's a better way? And suddenly, pain isn't personal, it's instructional. And once pain becomes a teacher instead of a threat, you stop running from it. You start choosing harder paths on purpose, not because you enjoy suffering, but because you respect what it gives you. Strength, clarity, depth. Which brings us to the final realization, the one most people avoid until it's too late. Pain isn't just part of life, it's what gives life its shape. But wait, this is where it all comes together.
Here's the truth most people only realize when life forces them to slow down. Pain is unavoidable, but meaningless pain is optional. This is where everything you've heard so far locks into place. Because pain by itself doesn't make you stronger. Pain with purpose does. And purpose comes from values. Not goals, not motivation, not comfort. Values. The things you're willing to suffer for. Because every value has a cost. Honesty costs comfort. Growth costs certainty. Love costs vulnerability. Freedom costs approval. There is no value without pain attached. So the real question isn't, how do I avoid suffering? It's, what am I willing to suffer for? Most people never consciously answer that,
They just absorb values from the world around them. Money, status, likes, attention, being right, looking successful. And then they wonder why life feels empty even when they're winning. Because those values create pain that never satisfies. No finish line, no peace, just more pressure. That's what Mark Manson calls bad values. They're shallow, they're uncontrollable, and they leave you anxious no matter how hard you try. Good values are different. They're internal, they're grounded, they're chosen. Things like growth, integrity, responsibility, courage, contribution. These values turn pain into progress. When you suffer for something meaningful, the pain doesn't disappear, but it makes sense. And meaning changes everything. That's why two people can experience the same hardship, and one breaks while the other becomes unstoppable. Same pain, different values. Now here's the uncomfortable part. Choosing meaningful pain means saying no to a lot of things. You can't care about everything. Trying to do that is what's exhausting you. You only get so many emotional fucks to give. Spend them wisely. Every yes costs you a no, and every no protects something important. Boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary. Saying no to what doesn't matter is how you say yes to what does. And here's the final shift, the one that changes how you live. Death is closer than you think. Not in a scary way, in a clarifying way. Knowing your time is limited cuts through the noise instantly. Suddenly, impressing strangers feels silly. Petty drama loses its grip. And the question becomes brutally simple. If this were my last year, would this matter? Most regrets at the end of life aren't about failure. They're about avoidance. Not saying what needed to be said, not choosing what mattered, not living according to your own values. People regret playing it safe far more than trying and failing. And that's the final lesson. Pain avoided today becomes regret tomorrow, but pain chosen today becomes strength tomorrow. So if you're struggling right now, good. It means you're alive. It means something matters. It means you're being shaped. You're not broken. You're being refined. The goal isn't a painless life. The goal is a meaningful one. One where you choose your struggles consciously. One where you stop wasting energy on what doesn't matter. One where pain becomes fuel, not poison. So ask yourself, honestly, what's worth suffering for? What values do you want your life to stand on? What problems are you willing to solve again and again? Choose those. Let go of the rest. And you won't just survive pain. You'll grow from it. You'll be defined by it. You'll become stronger because of it. If this hit home, don't just scroll. Subscribe and start choosing better problems today.